The first bruise bloomed like a violet flower beneath my eye. I traced its tender edges in the bathroom mirror, wincing as my fingertips brushed against swollen skin. The fluorescent light above me flickered, casting intermittent shadows across my face, distorting my reflection into something I barely recognized. 3 days since Mike had lost his temper. 3 days of wearing concealer that never quite covered the evidence, of crafting excuses about clumsiness, of avoiding eye contact with concerned coworkers at the diner. Just a few more months, I whispered to my reflection, a few more months of double shifts, of sleeping on a lumpy mattress in a studio apartment with faulty heating, of saving every possible penny. A few more months before I could finally leave this city and start fresh somewhere Mike couldn't find me. The ancient pipes groaned as I splashed cold water on my face, careful to avoid the bruise. The chill against my skin brought momentary relief from the constant ache. I patted my face dry with a threadbare towel that smelled faintly of mildew, no matter how many times I washed it. Outside, rain pattered against my single window, creating rivulets that distorted the view of brick walls and fire escapes. The sound was soothing, almost hypnotic, like nature's own lullaby coaxing me to forget my troubles, if only for a moment. I changed into my waitress uniform, a pale blue dress that had faded after countless washes, paired with sensible shoes that did little to ease the pain of standing for 8-hour shifts. The diner was only 10 blocks away, but in this downpour, it might as well have been miles. As I stepped outside, the cold October air bit at my cheeks. I pulled my thin jacket tighter around my body, wishing I could afford something warmer. The umbrella I clutched did little against the sideways rain, and within minutes, the hem of my uniform was soaked, clinging uncomfortably to my legs. Mercer Street Diner had been my workplace for almost 2 years now. It wasn't much. Just a 24-hour establishment with sticky tabletops and the perpetual smell of coffee and grease. But the tips were decent, and the manager, Donna, didn't ask questions when I needed extra shifts or when I showed up with occasional bruises. "You're early, Emma," Donna said as I entered, shaking raindrops from my hair. Her eyes narrowed slightly as they landed on my face, but she said nothing about the bruise. Instead, she handed me a coffee pot. "Table 7 needs a refill." The morning rush passed in a blur of coffee refills, pancake stacks, and forced smiles that made my cheek ache. By noon, the diner had emptied except for a lone businessman tapping away at his laptop and an elderly couple sharing a slice of apple pie. The bell above the door chimed, and a gust of cold air swept in, carrying with it the scent of rain and expensive cologne. I was wiping down the counter and didn't look up immediately, but I felt a sudden shift in the atmosphere. A heaviness, like the air before a storm. When I finally raised my eyes, my breath caught in my throat. 2 men had entered. The first was tall and broad-shouldered, with a shaved head and eyes that scanned the diner with mechanical precision. He stood by the door like a sentinel, hands clasped in front of him, the bulge of a concealed weapon visible beneath his tailored jacket, but it was the second man who commanded my attention. He couldn't have been more than 35, with dark hair that fell in perfect waves, just brushing the collar of what was clearly a custom-made suit. His features were sharp and aristocratic. High cheekbones, a strong jaw dusted with subtle stubble, and eyes so dark they appeared almost black in the diner's dim lighting. He moved with an effortless grace that spoke of someone accustomed to power, to being watched, to being obeyed. The businessman with the laptop took one look at the newcomers and hurriedly packed his things, leaving a $20 bill for a $10 meal. The elderly couple seemed oblivious, continuing their quiet conversation over shared dessert. The dark-haired man slid into a booth by the window, while his companion remained standing, his gaze constantly sweeping the diner. I grabbed a menu and approached their table, my heart inexplicably racing. "Good afternoon," I managed, proud that my voice remained steady. "Can I get you started with something to drink?" Those dark eyes studied my face with an intensity that made me want to shrink into myself. His gaze lingered on the bruise beneath my eye, and something dangerous flashed across his features, so quickly I might have imagined it. "Coffee," he said, his voice a smooth, rich baritone that sent an involuntary shiver down my spine. "Black." I nodded and turned to leave, but his voice stopped me. "And your name?" hesitated, debating whether to lie. Something in those eyes made me feel like he would know if I did. "Emma," I answered finally. A slight smile curved his lips. "Emma," he repeated, as if tasting the syllables. "I'm Alessio." No last name. Just Alessio, offered with the confidence of someone who expected to be recognized by a first name alone. I brought his coffee with slightly trembling hands, aware of his eyes tracking my every movement. As I set the cup down, his fingers brushed against mine, deliberately, I was certain, sending an electric jolt through my body. "Who hit you, Emma?" he asked, his voice deceptively casual, as if inquiring about the weather. The question caught me completely off guard. Most people pretended not to notice, or if they did, they certainly didn't ask so directly. Heat flooded my cheeks, and I took an instinctive step backward. "I fell," I said automatically, the lie I'd rehearsed countless times falling from my lips with practiced ease. Alessio's dark eyes hardened. "Don't lie to me," he said softly, dangerously. "It insults us both." My throat tightened with something between fear and indignation. "I don't see how it's any of your business," I replied, struggling to keep my voice even. Instead of being angered by my response, he seemed almost pleased, the corner of his mouth lifting slightly. "Sit," he said, gesturing to the seat opposite him. It wasn't a request. I glanced around the diner. Donna was in the back, the elderly couple was leaving, and no new customers had arrived. Still, I remained standing. "I'm working." "Sit," he repeated, and this time, the single word carried such weight that I found myself sliding into the booth before I could consider why I was obeying a stranger. "How long have you worked here, Emma?" he asked, taking a sip of his coffee, his eyes never leaving mine. 2 years, I answered cautiously. "And how long has he been hitting you?" I stiffened, my hands clenching into fists beneath the table. "I told you, I fell." Alessio leaned forward, and the movement wafted his scent toward me, sandalwood and something darker, more primal. "You work hard," he observed, ignoring my denial. "Double shifts, I imagine, saving for something important." The accuracy of his assessment sent a chill through me. How could he know that? An escape plan, perhaps? He continued, his voice dropping to a near whisper. "From whoever gave you that bruise." "Please," I said, my voice barely audible even to my own ears. "I could lose my job." Something softened in his gaze. He reached into his jacket and withdrew a sleek leather wallet. For a wild moment I thought he was going to offer me money, and I prepared to be insulted. Instead, he placed a simple white business card on the table between us. It contained only a phone number, embossed in black. "When you decide to stop lying to yourself, Emma," he said, sliding the card toward me, "call this number." Before I could respond, he stood in one fluid motion. He placed a $100 bill beside his barely touched coffee. "For your trouble," he said, then paused, his eyes once again lingering on my bruise. "Everyone deserves to feel safe, Emma. Remember that." And then he was gone, his silent companion following in his wake, leaving only the lingering scent of his cologne and the white card that seemed to burn against the laminate tabletop. I slipped the card into my pocket without examining it further, my mind racing with questions. Who was Alessio? Why had he taken such an interest in me? And how had he seen through my carefully constructed facade so easily? The rest of my shift passed in a daze. I kept expecting him to return, kept feeling phantom touches where his fingers had brushed mine. By the time I left the diner at 8, the rain had stopped, leaving the streets glistening under the streetlights. The night air felt different somehow, charged with possibility or perhaps warning. I was so distracted that I didn't notice the figure leaning against the building across from the diner until I was halfway down the block. My heart stuttered as I recognized Mike's hulking frame, his familiar slouched posture. He pushed himself away from the wall and started toward me, his face twisted with anger. "Where the hell have you been?" he demanded, grabbing my arm with enough force to leave bruises. "I've been calling you all day." "Working," I said, trying to pull away from his grip. "My phone died." His eyes narrowed with suspicion. "Bullshit. You've been avoiding me." His gaze dropped to my pocket, where the edge of the white business card was just visible. Before I could stop him, he snatched it out. "What's this?" he asked, studying the card, his face darkening. "Whose number is this, Emma? You cheating on me?" "No," I protested, reaching for the card. "It's just a customer, I never finished the sentence. Mike's open palm connected with my cheek, the same side as my existing bruise, with enough force to make me stagger. Pain exploded across my face, bright spots dancing in my vision. "Lying bitch," he spat, tearing the card to pieces and letting them scatter in the damp breeze. "You think I don't know when you're lying?" I backed away, tears blurring my vision, aware that we were on a public street, but equally aware that no one in this city ever intervened. Just like no one had ever intervened before. "I'm sorry," I whispered, the words automatic, meaningless. Mike grabbed my arm again and started pulling me roughly in the direction of his apartment. "You're coming home with me tonight," he growled. "I'm not letting you out of my sight again." Terror gripped me. Last time I'd gone to Mike's apartment after he'd been this angry, I'd left with cracked ribs. I couldn't go back there. Not tonight. Maybe not ever again. In that moment, something inside me snapped. Perhaps it was Alessio's words echoing in my head. Everyone deserves to feel safe. Or perhaps it was simply that I'd reached my breaking point. Whatever the reason, I planted my feet firmly on the sidewalk. "No," I said, the single syllable filled with every ounce of courage I could muster. Mike turned, his expression one of disbelief that quickly morphed into rage. "What did you just say to me?" "I said no," I repeated, my voice stronger now. "I'm not going with you." His hand balled into a fist, and I braced myself for the blow I knew was coming. But before he could swing, a sleek black car with tinted windows pulled up beside us, its engine purring almost silently. The back door opened, and I caught a glimpse of dark eyes and an outstretched hand. "Emma," Alessio's voice called from within the car. "Get in." I didn't hesitate. I wrenched my arm from Mike's slackened grip and dove into the car, the door closing behind me with a solid thunk that felt like the period at the end of a chapter. The last thing I saw as the car pulled away was Mike's face, contorted with rage and confusion, growing smaller in the distance. Inside the car, the scent of leather and sandalwood enveloped me. Alessio sat opposite, watching me with those intense eyes. The man from the diner, clearly a bodyguard, was in the front passenger seat, while a driver I hadn't seen before navigated the vehicle smoothly through the city streets. "How did you find me?" I asked, my voice shaking. Alessio's expression was unreadable. "I never lost you," he replied simply, as if that explained everything. I should have been frightened. I had just escaped one dangerous man only to put myself in the hands of another. A stranger with powerful connections and an air of controlled violence. But as the adrenaline faded, leaving me trembling in its wake, all I felt was an overwhelming sense of relief. "Who are you?" I whispered. He studied me for a long moment before answering. "Someone who doesn't tolerate men who hit women," he said finally. "Someone who can make sure he never touches you again." The promise in those words should have terrified me. Instead, I found myself believing him, trusting him, despite every instinct for self-preservation I'd developed over years of disappointment and pain. "Who hit you, Emma?" he asked again, his voice gentler now but no less intense. This time, I told him the truth. "His name is Mike Peterson," I said, the name bitter on my tongue. "My ex-boyfriend. He doesn't accept that it's over." Alessio nodded slowly, as if confirming something he already knew. He reached out, his fingers hovering near my freshly bruised cheek without actually touching it. "This ends tonight," he promised, and the absolute certainty in his voice sent a shiver through me, half fear, half something I wasn't ready to name. As the car carried us deeper into the city, toward an unknown destination, I realized I had just crossed a line from which there would be no return. The thought should have terrified me, but instead, I felt something I hadn't experienced in years. I felt safe. The car glided through the city streets like a phantom, its movement so smooth I barely felt us turning corners. Through tinted windows, I watched familiar neighborhoods transform into areas I'd only glimpsed from a distance, exclusive districts with immaculate sidewalks and buildings that reached toward the stars. My hand throbbed where Mike had gripped it, and my cheek pulsed with pain, but I remained silent. afraid that speaking might somehow break the spell of safety that had settled over me. Alessio made a brief phone call in what sounded like Italian, his voice low and commanding. Though I couldn't understand the words, the tone conveyed authority that required no translation. When he finished, he turned his attention back to me, those dark eyes studying my face as if memorizing every detail. "You need medical attention," he stated. Not a question, but a fact. I instinctively touched my cheek, wincing. "It's not that bad. I've had worse." Something dangerous flickered across his features. "That doesn't comfort me, Emma." The car eventually pulled up to a towering building of glass and steel that seemed to touch the night sky. The bodyguard exited first, scanning the area before opening Alessio's door, then mine. As I stepped out, the cool night air kissed my skin, carrying with it the clean scent of recent rain and wealth, a distinct absence of the garbage and exhaust fumes that permeated my neighborhood. "Where are we?" I asked, my voice small against the grandeur surrounding us. "My home," Alessio replied, placing his hand lightly at the small of my back as he guided me toward the entrance. The doorman bowed his head respectfully as we passed. "Good evening, Mr. Russo." So he did have a last name, Russo. The name tickled something in my memory, but I couldn't place it. The elevator required a key card and fingerprint to access the penthouse. As we ascended, my stomach fluttered with a mixture of anxiety and something else, anticipation perhaps, or the vertigo of moving too quickly from one world to another. The elevator opened directly into an expansive living area, with floor-to-ceiling windows showcasing a breathtaking panorama of the city below, a glittering carpet of lights stretching to the horizon. "Make yourself comfortable," Alessio said, shrugging off his jacket and loosening his tie. The casual gesture somehow made him more rather than less intimidating, a wolf relaxing without losing any of its predatory nature. "My personal physician will be here shortly." "That's really not necessary," I protested weakly, even as I sank into a sofa so luxuriously soft it felt like sitting on a cloud. "I can't afford—" "Money is not a concern," he interrupted, his tone brooking no argument. He poured amber liquid from a crystal decanter into 2 glasses and offered one to me. "For the pain," he explained. I accepted the glass, taking a small sip. The whiskey burned pleasantly down my throat, warming me from the inside. "Thank you," I said, realizing the inadequacy of the words. "For everything. For stopping him. I don't know what would have happened if you hadn't shown up." Alessio's expression darkened. "I have a very good idea of what would have happened," he said, his voice tight with controlled anger. "Men like that are predictable. They escalate. They don't stop until someone stops them." The way he said it, with absolute certainty and a hint of personal knowledge, made me wonder about his past, about what experiences had shaped him into the man before me. "How did you know?" I asked. "How did you know where to find me, when to intervene?" He took a seat in a leather armchair opposite me, swirling the whiskey in his glass. "After our conversation at the diner, I had one of my men watch over you. When you destroyed my card, I knew I needed to stay close." A chill ran down my spine. "You've been having me followed?" "I've been having you protected," he corrected, as if the distinction was obvious, and it's fortunate I did. Before I could formulate a response, the elevator chimed, and a distinguished-looking man with silver hair and wire-rimmed glasses stepped into the apartment, carrying a leather medical bag. "Alessio," he greeted with a slight Italian accent, before turning his professional gaze to me. "And this must be the patient." The next 20 minutes passed in a blur as the doctor examined my face, applied antiseptic that stung like fire, and confirmed that nothing was broken. He left me with pain medication, ointment for the bruising, and strict instructions to rest. Throughout the examination, Alessio never left the room, his eyes tracking the doctor's every move with an intensity that bordered on possessive. When we were alone again, an uncomfortable silence settled between us, filled with unasked questions. I broke it first. "I should go home," I said, though the thought of returning to my tiny apartment filled me with dread. "What if Mike was waiting for me?" "You'll stay here tonight," Alessio stated, not a suggestion but a command. Seeing my hesitation, he added, "In the guest room. You'll be safe." Relief and apprehension warred within me. "I have work tomorrow, early shift. Call in sick." I can't afford to lose a day's wages. Something like respect flickered in his eyes. I admire your work ethic, Emma, but you need to rest. As for the money, he waved a hand dismissively. Consider it handled. I bristled at this. I don't want your charity. A slow smile spread across his face. The first genuine smile I'd seen from him. It transformed his features from intimidating to devastatingly handsome. It's not charity when it's deserved, he said, but we can discuss compensation later, if it makes you more comfortable. He showed me to the guest room, a space larger than my entire apartment, with a king-sized bed draped in linens that probably cost more than I made in a month. An adjoining bathroom featured a shower with multiple jets and a bathtub deep enough to swim in. There are clothes in the dresser, Alessio said from the doorway. They should fit you well enough for tonight. I turned to face him, suddenly aware of the vast gulf between our worlds. Why are you doing this? I asked. The question that had been burning in my mind since he'd first noticed my bruise at the diner. Why help a stranger? Alessio studied me for a long moment, his expression unreadable. Get some rest, Emma, he said finally. We'll talk in the morning. With that, he closed the door, leaving me alone in luxury I'd never dreamed of experiencing. I found silk pajamas in the dresser, tags still attached, that fit perfectly, raising questions I was too exhausted to contemplate. After a shower that felt like standing beneath a warm waterfall, I slipped between sheets so soft they felt like a caress against my skin. Despite the strangeness of my surroundings and the tumultuous events of the evening, sleep claimed me almost instantly. Dreams came in fractured pieces. Mike's angry face, Alessio's intense eyes, a sense of falling, of being chased, of finally being caught. I woke with a gasp, disoriented in the darkness of an unfamiliar room. For a panicked moment, I couldn't remember where I was or how I'd gotten there. Then memories of the previous night flooded back, and I collapsed against the pillows, my heart still racing. The digital clock on the nightstand read 3:17 a.m. Through the floor-to-ceiling windows, the city spread below me like a map of stars, beautiful and distant. I slipped out of bed, drawn to the view, pressing my palm against the cool glass and feeling like I was floating above the world. The sound of voices, low, urgent, drifted from beyond my door. Curious, I padded silently across the plush carpet and pressed my ear against the wood. Alessio was speaking, his voice hard with an authority I hadn't heard from him before. I want every door in this city broken down if necessary, he was saying. Find him. Tonight, another voice responded, too low for me to make out the words. I don't care about jurisdiction, Alessio replied, a dangerous edge to his tone. This is personal now. He touched what's mine. What's mine? The possessive declaration sent a shiver through me. Half thrill, half warning. I barely knew this man, yet here I was in his home, under his protection, and apparently, in his mind, under his claim. I should have been frightened, or at least indignant. Instead, a treacherous warmth spread through me at the thought of being considered precious enough to protect, to claim, to avenge. The voices moved away, and I returned to bed, my mind spinning with questions. Who exactly was Alessio Russo? What kind of man commanded such power and loyalty that he could order every door in the city broken down? And what did it mean for me to be caught in his orbit? Morning arrived with golden light streaming through windows I'd forgotten to cover. For a moment, I lay perfectly still, savoring the comfort of the bed and the quiet luxury surrounding me. My cheek still ached, but the sharp pain had dulled to a persistent throb. The events of the previous night felt dreamlike, too fantastical to have actually happened. A soft knock at the door pulled me from my thoughts. I sat up, pulling the sheets around me. Yes? The door opened slightly, and a woman with a sleek bob and professional attire peered in. Good morning, Ms. Bennett. Mr. Russo asked me to check if you're awake. Breakfast is ready whenever you'd like to join him. I blinked in surprise, both at the formal address and at the realization that Alessio knew my last name, something I hadn't shared with him. Thank you, I managed. I'll be out shortly. She nodded and closed the door, leaving me to wonder who she was. An employee? A girlfriend? The thought brought an unexpected pang of jealousy that I immediately chastised myself for. What right did I have to feel possessive over a man I'd just met? In the dresser, I found not only more pajamas, but an entire wardrobe of women's clothing in approximately my size. Jeans, blouses, dresses, even underwear with tags still attached. The selection was tasteful and expensive, making me wonder if Alessio regularly kept women's clothing on hand for overnight guests. The thought left a bitter taste in my mouth. I settled on jeans and a simple cream sweater that felt softer against my skin than anything I'd ever owned. In the bathroom, I examined my face in the mirror. The bruising had spread, painting my cheekbone in shades of purple and blue that no amount of concealer could hide. I did what I could with the makeup I found in the drawer, another unsettling reminder that perhaps I wasn't the first woman to need sanctuary here. When I finally emerged from the guest room, I followed the scent of coffee to a spacious kitchen where Alessio sat at a marble island, reading something on a tablet. He looked up as I entered, his eyes sweeping over me in a way that felt like a physical touch. "Good morning," he said, setting aside the tablet. "How did you sleep?" "Better than I have in months," I admitted, taking the seat across from him. A spread of breakfast foods that wouldn't have been out of place in a 5-star hotel lay between us. Pastries, fruit, eggs, smoked salmon. "Your face looks worse," he observed, his expression hardening as he studied my bruise. "It always looks worse the next day," I said without thinking, then regretted the words when his jaw tightened. "Has he been arrested before?" Alessio asked, pouring coffee into a mug and sliding it toward me. "For assaulting you or anyone else?" I wrapped my fingers around the warm mug, drawing comfort from its heat. "I called the police once about 6 months ago. He was gone by the time they arrived. They took a report, but nothing came of it. Said they couldn't do anything without evidence or witnesses." Alessio's expression remained neutral, but something dangerous lurked in his eyes. "And you stayed with him after that?" "No," I said firmly, wanting him to understand. "I left him that night, but he kept finding me, showing up at work, at my apartment. I changed my number 3 times, but he always gets it somehow. I've been saving to move out of state, somewhere he can't find me. And in the meantime, you endure his violence," Alessio said. Not a question, but a statement of fact. I looked down at my coffee. I try to avoid him, but yes, sometimes there's no escape. "There's always an escape, Emma," he said softly. "You just need the right resources." A chime sounded, and Alessio checked his phone, his expression shifting to one of grim satisfaction. "Excuse me for a moment," he said, rising from his seat. "Help yourself to breakfast." He stepped into the adjacent room, leaving the door ajar. Though I knew I shouldn't eavesdrop, I couldn't help but strain to hear his conversation. "You have him?" A pause. "Good. No police involvement. Bring him to the warehouse. I want to handle this personally." My blood turned to ice. Those words, spoken with such casual menace, confirmed what I had suspected, but tried to ignore. Alessio Russo was dangerous, perhaps more dangerous than Mike had ever been. When he returned, his expression was composed, but there was an energy about him, a tightly coiled readiness that reminded me of a predator preparing to strike. "Is everything okay?" I asked, my voice steadier than I felt. "Everything is perfect," he replied, a cold smile playing at his lips. "In fact, I have some good news. Your problem has been located." The way he said it made my skin crawl with apprehension. "What does that mean? What are you going to do to him?" Alessio studied me, his head tilted slightly. "Do you care what happens to him? After everything he's done to you?" I swallowed hard. "I don't want anyone hurt because of me." "Even the man who did this?" he asked, gesturing to my bruised face. "Violence for violence solves nothing," I said, the words sounding hollow even to my own ears. Alessio leaned forward, his gaze intense. "Let me tell you something about men like Mike Peterson, Emma. They understand only one language: power. They prey on those they perceive as weak. They take and take until someone stronger stops them." His voice dropped lower. "I am that someone. Fear and something darker, more primal, twisted in my gut." "Who are you?" "Really?" He considered me for a long moment, as if weighing how much truth to reveal. "My family has certain business interests in this city," he said carefully. "We ensure that agreements are honored, that debts are paid, that order is maintained. The implication hung in the air between us. I had heard rumors, of course, everyone in the city had, about the families that controlled the underworld, whose influence extended into legitimate businesses, politics, even law enforcement. The Russos were one of those families. "You're a crime boss," I whispered, the realization solidifying into certainty. Alessio's expression remained impassive. "I prefer to think of myself as a businessman with diverse interests and unique methods of conflict resolution." A hysterical laugh escaped me before I could stop it. "Is that what this is? Conflict resolution?" "In its most efficient form," he confirmed, unruffled by my reaction. "By this afternoon, Mike Peterson will never bother you again. You have my word." The absolute certainty with which he made this promise chilled me to the bone. I stood abruptly, my chair scraping against the floor. "I should go. Thank you for your help, but I can't be involved in whatever this is." Alessio rose as well, moving with that fluid grace that seemed at odds with his dangerous aura. "You're already involved, Emma. The moment he laid hands on you in my city, this became inevitable." "Your city?" I repeated, backing away slightly. "I didn't ask for this. I didn't ask for you to what? Have him killed?" Something like disappointment flashed across Alessio's features. "Is that what you think of me? That I would kill a man for simply touching what's mine?" There it was again, that possessive claim that sent conflicting signals of warning and desire through my body. "I'm not yours," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. "You don't even know me." He moved closer, and I found myself backed against the kitchen counter, his presence overwhelming my senses. "I know enough," he said softly. "I know you're brave. I know you're a survivor. I know you deserve better than what life has given you so far." His hand reached up, fingers hovering near my bruised cheek without touching it. "And I know that from the moment I saw you in that diner, I couldn't look away." His proximity made it hard to think, to breathe. Alessio radiated heat and danger and something magnetic that pulled at me despite every warning bell sounding in my mind. The rational part of my brain screamed that I should run, that I'd escaped one violent man only to fall into the orbit of another, potentially more dangerous one. But another part, a part I was afraid to examine too closely, whispered that with Alessio, I felt seen in a way I never had before. "What do you want from me?" I asked, my voice barely audible even in the kitchen's perfect stillness. His dark eyes searched mine, looking for something I wasn't sure I could give. "First," he said, finally stepping back and giving me space to breathe, "I want you to trust me." A bitter laugh escaped me. "Trust you? I don't even know you. Everything about this," I gestured around the luxurious penthouse, "is completely foreign to me. And what little I do know suggests you're involved in things I've spent my whole life avoiding." Alessio's expression remained unreadable as he leaned against the opposite counter, creating distance between us that felt both like relief and loss. "Fair enough," he conceded. "Ask me anything. I'll tell you the truth." The offer hung between us, tempting and terrifying. There were so many questions burning in my mind, but I wasn't sure I wanted the answers. Knowledge was its own kind of danger. "Did you really have every door in the city broken down looking for Mike?" I asked finally, remembering the fragment of conversation I'd overheard. A ghost of a smile touched his lips. "Not quite every door, but enough. I have people throughout the city. When I give an order, it gets done." "And what exactly are you planning to do with him now that you've found him?" Alessio studied me for a long moment. "Do you really want to know? Did I?" The question echoed in my mind. Part of me wanted Mike to suffer, as he'd made me suffer. Part of me recoiled at the thought of being responsible for whatever fate Alessio had planned for him. But ignorance wouldn't absolve me of complicity. "Yes," I said, lifting my chin despite the fear coiling in my stomach. "I want to know." Alessio nodded, as if my answer had confirmed something important. "I'm going to make sure he understands the consequences of his actions," he said carefully. "I'm going to ensure he never comes near you again. But I'm not going to kill him, if that's what you're afraid of." Relief washed through me, quickly followed by skepticism. "Just like that?" You'll rough him up and he'll leave me alone forever? It's not that simple. It is when you have resources, Alessio replied. Men like Mike respond to power and fear. I have plenty of both to spare. Before I could respond, a discreet knock sounded at the door to the kitchen. The woman with the sleek bob from earlier entered, her expression professionally blank. Excuse me, Mr. Russo, but Mr. Conti is on the line. He says it's urgent. Alessio's jaw tightened imperceptibly. Tell him I'll call back. He insisted, sir. He mentioned the situation at the docks. A flash of annoyance crossed Alessio's features, but he nodded. I'll take it in my office. Make sure Ms. Bennett has everything she needs. As he left, the woman, clearly some sort of assistant, turned to me with a polite smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. Is there anything I can get for you, Ms. Bennett? Actually, I was hoping to leave, I said, gathering my courage. Could you call me a cab? Her smile remained fixed. I'm afraid Mr. Russo has instructed that you remain here for your safety. He shouldn't be long. The polite phrasing didn't disguise the truth. I was effectively being held, if not quite against my will, then certainly without my explicit consent. A cold feeling settled in the pit of my stomach. I see, I replied, forcing myself to remain calm. Then I'd like to go back to the guest room if that's all right. Of course. She gestured toward the hallway. Please let me know if you need anything else. Back in the guest room, I paced anxiously, trying to make sense of my situation. I was in the penthouse of a man who had all but admitted to being a crime boss. A man who had ordered the city turned upside down to find my abuser. A man who clearly had some sort of claim on me that I didn't fully understand. The rational course of action would be to leave as soon as possible, to grab my belongings and run far from both Mike and Alessio. But where would I go? My apartment wasn't safe. I had no family to turn to, no friends close enough to shelter me. And the money I'd saved, while substantial, wouldn't last long if I had to start over completely without a job or references. A light knock at the door interrupted my spiraling thoughts. Come in, I called, expecting the assistant again. Instead, Alessio entered, his expression troubled. I apologize for the interruption, he said, closing the door behind him. Business sometimes requires immediate attention. Am I a prisoner here? I asked directly, tired of dancing around the truth. Surprise flickered across his features. Of course not. Why would you think that? Your assistant made it clear I'm not to leave. Alessio frowned. Sophia is overzealous in her interpretation of my instructions. I asked her to ensure you were comfortable and had everything you needed while I was gone. You're free to leave anytime you wish. He paused, his expression softening. Though I hope you'll choose to stay, at least until we've resolved your situation. The sincerity in his voice made me want to believe him, but doubt lingered. And what exactly is my situation, as you see it? Alessio moved further into the room, maintaining a respectful distance. You're being stalked and assaulted by a man who doesn't respect your boundaries or your safety. You're working multiple jobs to save enough money to escape. You don't have anyone to turn to for protection. His eyes held mine steadily. How am I doing so far? The accuracy of his assessment stung. What do you propose, then? Let me help you, he said simply. Stay here while I ensure Mike Peterson is no longer a threat. Let me offer you the protection you deserve. And what do you get out of this arrangement? I asked, because nothing in life came for free. I'd learned that lesson painfully and repeatedly. Alessio's lips curved in a smile that was both charming and predatory. Your company for now. The rest, we'll see. The implication hung in the air between us, neither acknowledged nor denied. He wanted me. That much was clear from the heat in his gaze when it traveled over me. But there was something else too, something possessive and protective that went beyond mere physical attraction. I need time to think, I said finally. He nodded. Take all the time you need. In the meantime, there's someone I'd like you to meet. He gestured toward the door, if you're willing. Curiosity overcame my hesitation. Who? Someone who might help you understand my world a little better. I followed him out of the guest room, through the expansive living area, and into what appeared to be a home office. A woman waited there, perhaps in her late 50s, elegant in a tailored suit with silver streaking through her dark hair. She stood when we entered, her eyes, so similar to Alessio's, assessing me with keen intelligence. "Emma, this is my mother, Sophia Russo," Alessio said, a note of warmth in his voice I hadn't heard before. "Mama, this is Emma Bennett." "So you're the girl who's caused such a stir," Sophia said, her Italian accent more pronounced than her son's. She approached me, taking my hands in hers. "My son has turned the city upside down for you." I felt heat rise to my cheeks, painfully aware of my bruised face and borrowed clothes. "I didn't ask him to," I said, then winced at how ungrateful it sounded. To my surprise, Sophia laughed, a warm, genuine sound. "Of course you didn't. My son has always done exactly as he pleases." She released my hands and touched my bruised cheek with gentle fingers. "This man who hurt you, he'll never touch you again. The Russo family protects its own." "I'm not," I began, but she waved away my protest. "You're here, aren't you?" she said, as if that settled the matter. "Alessio, leave us." I wished to speak with Emma alone. Something passed between mother and son. A silent communication I couldn't decipher. After a moment, Alessio nodded. "Don't frighten her, Mama," he said, a hint of amusement in his voice before he left, closing the door behind him. Sophia gestured to the sitting area near the window. "Come, let's talk." I followed her, perching on the edge of a leather chair while she settled gracefully onto the sofa opposite. "Mrs. Russo." "Sophia, please," she interrupted. Mrs. Russo was my mother-in-law, and that woman terrified me for 30 years. She smiled, the expression warming her austere features. "My son has never brought a woman to meet me before." The revelation surprised me. Never. "Oh, he's had women," she said with a dismissive wave. "Beautiful, sophisticated women who understand his world and accept it without question. But he's never brought one home, never asked for my opinion, never looked at one the way he looks at you." I didn't know how to respond to that. I barely know him. "And yet, here you are," she pointed out. "In our home, wearing clothes he selected for you, accepting his protection." "I didn't have many options," I said defensively. Sophia's expression softened. "We rarely do, as women. The choices we make are often between bad and worse. But sometimes, if we're lucky, we find someone who can offer us something better." She leaned forward, her dark eyes, so like her son's, intent on mine. "My husband was like Alessio, powerful, dangerous to his enemies, fiercely protective of what he considered his. He wasn't always an easy man to love, but he made me feel safe in a world that had never been kind to me. Is that what you think I should do? Love your son because he's offering me protection?" "No," she replied firmly. "I think you should decide what you want your life to be, and whether Alessio can help you achieve it. But understand this, if you accept what he offers, you accept all of him, the darkness, as well as the light." The honesty was refreshing after so much careful maneuvering. "And if I decide I want no part of this world, then he will ensure you have the means to leave safely, and you will never see either of us again." Her expression remained serene, but there was steel beneath it. "But you should know that my son is not accustomed to wanting things he cannot have. This restraint. It is unusual for him." A chill ran down my spine at the implication. Before I could respond, a knock sounded at the door, and Alessio entered without waiting for a response. "I hate to interrupt," he said, though his expression suggested otherwise, "but there's been a development regarding Ms. Bennett's situation." Sophia rose smoothly. "We were just finishing our chat." She pressed a light kiss to my cheek, the unbruised one. "Think about what I said, Kara." With a meaningful look at her son, she left, closing the door softly behind her. "What did she say to you?" Alessio asked, his tone casual but his eyes watchful. "She was honest about what accepting your help would mean," I replied carefully. A ghost of a smile touched his lips. "My mother has never believed in softening difficult truths." He moved to sit in the chair Sophia had vacated. "Mike Peterson has been dealt with." My heart stuttered in my chest. "What does that mean? What did you do to him?" "Nothing permanent," he assured me, his tone almost gentle. "But he understands now that you are under my protection. He won't bother you again, just like that?" I couldn't keep the skepticism from my voice. Just like that, Alessio confirmed. He's also been persuaded to leave the city. Tonight. I've arranged a job for him in a small town about 2,000 miles away. If he values his continued health, he'll take it and never return. The relief that washed through me was so intense it left me dizzy. The nightmare that had shadowed my life for months was being dismantled with casual efficiency by a man who seemed to reshape reality through sheer force of will. Why? I whispered, asking the question that had burned in me since he first noticed my bruise in the diner. Why go to such lengths for a stranger? Alessio's expression turned contemplative. When I saw you in that diner, trying so hard to hide your pain, to keep going despite what had been done to you, something in me responded. I've known women who suffered at the hands of men who claimed to love them. My own sister years ago. A shadow crossed his features. I couldn't protect her then. I was too young, too powerless, but I'm not powerless anymore. The raw honesty in his voice caught me off guard. It was the first real glimpse beneath the controlled exterior, and what I saw there, pain, regret, determination, made him suddenly more human, more complex than the dangerous crime boss I'd been trying to keep at arm's length. What happened to your sister? I asked softly. She died, he said simply. The words weighted with old grief. Her boyfriend pushed her during an argument. She fell, hit her head. He didn't even call for help, just left her there to die alone. I'm so sorry, I said, understanding now the source of his visceral reaction to my bruise, to men like Mike. It was a long time ago, he replied, his expression closing off again, but I made a promise then that I would never allow such a thing to happen to anyone under my protection again. And now that includes me, I said, not quite a question. If you'll accept it, he confirmed. My protection comes with no strings attached, Emma. You're free to stay or go as you choose. If you want to leave the city, start fresh somewhere else, I'll provide the means for you to do so safely. The offer was generous, more than generous. It was everything I'd been working toward, handed to me without condition. So why did the thought of taking it, of walking away from Alessio Russo and never seeing him again, leave me with an unexpected sense of loss? And if I stay? I asked, my heart pounding in my chest. Something darkened in his gaze. Hunger, possession, something primal and magnetic. Then we explore what's between us at whatever pace you set. No pressure, no expectations beyond what you're comfortable with. Your mother seems to think you're not used to restraint, I said, watching his reaction carefully. A slow smile spread across his face. My mother knows me too well, but for you, I'm willing to learn patience. The promise in those words sent heat spreading through me. This was dangerous. He was dangerous. And yet, for the first time in longer than I could remember, I felt something like hope flickering to life inside me. I need time, I said finally. To think, to process everything that's happened. Alessio nodded, as if he'd expected nothing less. Take all the time you need. The guest room is yours for as long as you want it. He rose from his chair with that fluid grace that seemed so effortless. I have business to attend to this afternoon, but I'd like to take you to dinner this evening if you're amenable. A proper first date. The normalcy of the request, so at odds with the extraordinary circumstances that had brought us together, startled a laugh from me. A date? Really? His smile widened, transforming his face from intimidating to devastatingly handsome. Really? I find I want to know everything about you. Emma Bennett, your favorite food, your dreams, what makes you laugh. He paused at the door. Say yes. Despite everything, the danger he represented, the world he belonged to, the whirlwind of the past 24 hours. I found myself nodding. Yes. The look of genuine pleasure that crossed his features made him seem younger, almost boyish for a moment. 8 o'clock, he said, then left me alone with my thoughts and the dizzying sense that my life had been irrevocably changed. Left alone in Alessio's office, I moved to the window, gazing out at the city sprawled below like a miniature kingdom. From this height, everything looked orderly and perfect. So different from the chaotic, often brutal reality at street level. I wondered if this was how Alessio saw the world. Distant, manageable, subject to his control. The door opened behind me, and Sophia's assistant, Not Sophia herself, as I'd momentarily hoped, entered with a polite smile. "Ms. Bennett, I've been asked to assist you with anything you might need for this evening. Mr. Russo has arranged for a selection of clothes to be delivered. They're in the guest room whenever you'd like to look through them." I followed her back to the guest room, where I found not just a selection, but what appeared to be an entire boutique's worth of designer dresses, shoes, and accessories laid out on the bed. Price tags had been discreetly removed, but I recognized enough brands to know that the collection represented more money than I made in a year. "This is too much," I said, running my fingers over a midnight blue silk dress that caught my eye despite my reservations. "Mr. Russo wanted to ensure you had options," the assistant replied neutrally. "He also arranged for a stylist and makeup artist to help you prepare, if you'd like." The extravagance was overwhelming, almost suffocating. Was this how Alessio solved all problems? With an overwhelming display of resources that left no room for refusal? "Please thank Mr. Russo," I said carefully. "But I don't need all this. Just the makeup artist, perhaps. My bruise would require professional help to conceal for the evening." The assistant nodded, seemingly unsurprised by my partial refusal. "Of course. I'll arrange for someone to come at 6:30. Is there anything else you need in the meantime?" I hesitated, then decided to take a risk. "Actually, I'd like to go to my apartment to collect some personal items. Would that be possible?" Something flickered in her expression, uncertainty perhaps. "I'll need to check with Mr. Russo. Security considerations." "Of course," I interrupted. My suspicion confirmed. Despite his assurances, I wasn't quite as free as Alessio wanted me to believe. "In that case, I'd like to rest until this evening. It's been a lot to process." Once alone, I paced the room, feeling increasingly like a bird in a gilded cage. The freedom Alessio had promised came with invisible strings, protection that bordered on possession, generosity that threatened to become control. And yet, there was something about him, a glimpse of vulnerability beneath the power, a genuine concern beneath the possessiveness, that kept me from simply walking away. I selected the midnight blue dress that had caught my eye earlier, along with more modest accessories than what had been provided. If I was going to have dinner with Alessio Russo, I would do it on my own terms, not as a display of his wealth and influence, but as myself. The makeup artist arrived promptly at 6:30, a cheerful woman who chatted about everything and nothing as she worked miracles with concealer and foundation, transforming my bruised face into something presentable. By the time she finished, only the faintest shadow remained visible beneath expertly applied makeup. "Mr. Russo has excellent taste," she commented as I slipped into the blue dress. "That color is perfect with your complexion." I studied my reflection in the full-length mirror, barely recognizing the elegant woman staring back at me. The dress hugged my figure before flowing gracefully to the floor, the deep blue making my pale skin glow, and my eyes appear more intensely green. With my hair swept up and minimal jewelry, the effect was sophisticated but not flashy, beautiful without trying too hard. Precisely at 8, a knock sounded at the door. I opened it to find Alessio standing there, devastating in a perfectly tailored black suit that emphasized his broad shoulders and lean waist. He'd styled his dark hair slightly differently, and the effect was both polished and just disheveled enough to make my fingers itch to run through it. His eyes widened almost imperceptibly as they took in my appearance, a flash of something primal and possessive darkening his gaze before he controlled it. "You look breathtaking," he said, his voice a touch rougher than usual. "Thank you," I replied, pleased despite myself at his reaction. "You clean up pretty well yourself." A ghost of a smile touched his lips. "I try." He offered his arm. "Shall we?" The elevator took us to the underground garage, where a sleek black car waited with a driver holding the door. As we settled into the back seat, I couldn't help but ask, "Where are we going?" "Somewhere special," Alessio replied enigmatically. "I think you'll like it." The city lights blurred past the tinted windows as we drove. I expected us to head toward the exclusive restaurant district downtown, but instead, we turned toward the waterfront, eventually pulling up to what appeared to be a private marina. "This isn't a restaurant," I observed as Alessio helped me from the car. "No," he agreed, guiding me toward the pier where a stunning yacht was docked, its white exterior gleaming under the moonlight. I thought we might enjoy more privacy for our first date. I hesitated. A yacht meant complete isolation. No witnesses, no easy escape if things went wrong. As if sensing my unease, Alessio squeezed my hand gently. My chef has prepared dinner, and there are crew members aboard. We're not alone, he assured me, and we'll stay docked if that makes you more comfortable. The consideration in his voice eased my concern somewhat. I nodded, allowing him to lead me up the gangway onto a deck that could have graced the pages of a luxury magazine. Soft lighting illuminated comfortable seating areas, and a table had been set with fine china, crystal, and fresh flowers near the stern, offering a spectacular view of the city skyline. A uniformed steward appeared with champagne, pouring 2 glasses before discreetly disappearing. Alessio handed one to me, then raised his in a toast. "To new beginnings," he said, his dark eyes holding mine. "To new beginnings," I echoed, taking a sip of champagne that tasted like liquid stars. "This is beautiful, Alessio, but excessive for a first date, don't you think?" He smiled. That genuine expression that transformed his face from intimidating to irresistible. "Perhaps, but I wanted to impress you. You've already done that," I pointed out. "Finding Mike in a single night, arranging his entire future to ensure my safety, that's impressive. Terrifying, but impressive." Alessio laughed, a warm, rich sound that I realized I'd rarely heard from him. "You're not easily dazzled by the trappings of wealth and power. I like that about you. What else do you like about me?" I asked boldly, the champagne and the moonlight making me braver than I might otherwise have been. "You barely know me, yet you've turned your life upside down for me in the span of 24 hours. He considered the question seriously, as we moved to the table where the first course awaited us. Delicate scallops arranged like artwork on the plate. "I like your resilience," he said finally. "The strength it takes to endure what you have and still remain, uncorrupted by it. You haven't let pain make you cruel or bitter." The observation was so unexpected, so perceptive that it momentarily stole my breath. "And what about you?" I asked when I could speak again. "Has pain made you cruel?" Alessio's expression darkened slightly. "At times, perhaps, to those who deserve it." He took a sip of his wine, his eyes never leaving mine. "My world isn't kind, Emma. I won't pretend otherwise. But within it, there are codes, rules, a certain order that provides its own kind of justice." "Justice," I repeated, testing the word. "Is that what you gave Mike? Justice?" "I gave him a choice," Alessio corrected. "Leave and never contact you again or face consequences." He chose wisely. Throughout the meal, each course more exquisite than the last, our conversation flowed surprisingly easily. Alessio asked about my childhood. My dreams before life had intervened with harsh reality. I found myself telling him things I'd never shared with anyone, about growing up with a mother who cycled through abusive relationships, about putting myself through community college one class at a time, about the art I'd once created before survival took precedence over passion. In turn, he shared carefully edited stories about his own youth, a father who ruled with iron discipline, a mother who tempered that harshness with love, a sister whose loss had shaped his view of the world. He spoke of responsibility, of family legacy, of the weight of power, always in general terms, never specifics that might implicate him in anything illegal. "You never finished your degree," he observed as dessert was served, a confection of dark chocolate and berries that looked too beautiful to eat. "In art, you said?" I nodded, surprised he'd caught that detail. "I was 3 credits short when my mom got sick. Medical bills, funeral costs. There was nothing left for tuition." "And you never went back?" "Life got in the way," I said simply. "Rent doesn't pay itself. Dreams are a luxury I couldn't afford." Something shifted in Alessio's expression. Determination, perhaps, or resolve. "Dreams aren't luxuries, Emma. They're necessities. They're what make life worth the struggle." He reached across the table, his fingers brushing mine. "What if you could go back, finish what you started?" The question hung in the air between us. Not just about education, but about possibilities, about a future different from the one I'd resigned myself to. "I don't know," I admitted. "That feels like a different lifetime now." "It doesn't have to be," he said softly. After dinner, we moved to the upper deck where the view of the city was even more spectacular. The night air carried a chill, and Alessio placed a cashmere throw around my shoulders, his hands lingering a moment longer than necessary. "Cold?" he asked, standing close enough that I could feel the heat radiating from his body. "A little," I admitted. He moved behind me, his chest against my back, arms encircling me as we gazed out at the glittering skyline. I should have felt trapped by the embrace, but instead, I felt oddly safe, protected. His chin rested lightly on the top of my head, and for a moment, we simply existed together in comfortable silence. "You never answered my question from earlier," I said finally. "Why me? Out of all the women in this city, why did I catch your attention?" I felt, rather than saw his smile. "Because you looked at me without fear or calculation," he said, his voice a low rumble against my back. "Do you know how rare that is in my world? People either fear me or want something from me. You just saw me." "I see you now too," I said, turning in his arms to face him. "The good and the bad, the protector and the predator." His eyes darkened at my words. "And which do you prefer?" "I think they're inseparable," I replied honestly. "One doesn't exist without the other." Something like approval flickered across his features. Slowly, deliberately giving me time to pull away, he lowered his head until his lips hovered just above mine. "May I?" he asked, his breath warm against my skin. In answer, I rose on tiptoes and closed the distance between us. The kiss began gently, a question, an exploration, but quickly deepened as Alessio's control slipped. His hands tangled in my hair, dislodging pins until it fell loose around my shoulders. My arms wound around his neck, pulling him closer as heat bloomed between us, consuming rational thought. When we finally broke apart, both breathless, Alessio rested his forehead against mine. "I should take you home," he said, his voice rough with restraint, "before I forget myself entirely." The honorable gesture only made me want him more. "And if I don't want to go home yet?" His eyes searched mine, looking for certainty. "Emma, I want there to be no doubt in your mind, no regrets tomorrow." The consideration touched me deeply. This man, who commanded such power, who could take whatever he wanted, was giving me complete control over what happened between us. "Take me back to the penthouse," I said softly. "We'll decide there." The ride back was charged with tension, a delicious anticipation that had us sitting closer than necessary, his hand resting on mine between us. In the elevator to the penthouse, Alessio maintained a careful distance, though his eyes never left mine. Once inside, he offered me a nightcap, which I declined. "I want to be clear-headed tonight," I explained, watching his eyes darken at the implication. "Emma," he began, his voice tight with restraint, "you should know that if we do this, if we cross this line, I'm not a man who shares what's his. I'm possessive, protective. Some would say controlling. It's in my nature, in my blood." "Are you warning me away?" I asked, moving closer to him. "I'm being honest about who I am," he replied. "I want you to choose with your eyes open." I reached up to touch his face, feeling the slight roughness of stubble beneath my fingers. "I see you, Alessio Russo, the darkness and the light, and I'm still here." With a groan that sounded like surrender, he pulled me against him, his mouth claiming mine in a kiss that burned away the last of my doubts. I melted into him, giving myself over to sensation as his hands traced the contours of my body through the silk of my dress. "Bedroom," I gasped when his lips moved to my neck, sending shivers of pleasure down my spine. He lifted me effortlessly, carrying me down the hallway not to the guest room I'd occupied, but to the master suite, a spacious sanctuary dominated by a massive bed. As he laid me gently on the dark sheets, I had a fleeting thought that this was a point of no return. After tonight, nothing would ever be the same. And as Alessio's body covered mine, as we lost ourselves in each other, I found I didn't care. For the first time in years, I wasn't thinking about escape or survival. I was fully present in the moment, alive in every cell, burning with a passion I'd thought long extinguished. Later, as we lay tangled in sheets in each other, Alessio traced lazy patterns on my bare back. "Stay with me," he murmured against my hair. Not just tonight. Always. The request should have terrified me. It was too soon, too fast, too intense. But in the warm cocoon of his embrace, it felt right. Inevitable, even. What would that mean? I asked, propping myself up on one elbow to see his face. Being with you? His expression was more open, more vulnerable than I'd ever seen it. It means protection, security, never having to struggle or fear again. It means a life of comfort, of possibilities. His hand cupped my cheek gently. It means being mine, Emma, completely. And in return? I pressed. What do I give you? Loyalty, he said immediately. Discretion. Understanding of certain aspects of my business that can't be discussed outside these walls. His thumb brushed my lower lip. And this. Your heart. Your body. Your truth. No masks between us. No lies. It was a seductive offer. A life beyond my wildest dreams in exchange for loving a dangerous man. But I wasn't naive enough to think it would be simple. Your world is violent, Alessio. Would I have to become violent too, to survive in it? He shook his head. You would be separate from that part of my life. Protected from it. His eyes held mine intently. I would never ask you to compromise who you are, Emma. Your goodness, your compassion, they are what draw me to you. Why would I want to change that? I laid my head on his chest, listening to the steady beat of his heart as I considered his words. There were 1,000 reasons to say no, to walk away while I still could. But there was one overwhelming reason to stay. For the first time in my life, I felt truly seen, truly valued, truly protected. Yes, I whispered against his skin. I'll stay. The word had barely left my lips when the peaceful moment was shattered by a sharp knock at the bedroom door. Alessio tensed beneath me, instantly alert. What is it? He called, his voice shifting back to the commanding tone I'd first heard from him. Sorry to disturb you, boss, came a male voice. One of his security team, I guessed. There's been an incident at the warehouse. Conti says it can't wait. Alessio cursed under his breath, then kissed my forehead. I have to deal with this. Wait here. He rose fluidly from the bed, pulling on clothes with efficient movements. I watched him transform before my eyes, from the passionate lover of moments ago to the controlled, dangerous man I'd first met. It was a sobering reminder of the duality I was accepting. Will you be long? I asked, drawing the sheet around me. I'll try not to be, he said, buttoning his shirt. Sleep if you can. I'll be back before morning. After he left, I lay awake in his massive bed, my body still humming with pleasure but my mind racing with questions. What had I just committed to? A relationship with a man I barely knew. A man whose business involved things I deliberately hadn't asked about. A man who had ordered every door in the city broken down to find the person who had hurt me. It was madness by any rational standard. And yet, I couldn't bring myself to regret it. For the first time in years, I felt something like hope for the future. A future where I wasn't always running, always afraid, always alone. Sleep eventually claimed me. But it was restless, filled with fragments of dreams where Mike's angry face morphed into shadowy figures, where doors splintered under violent blows, where Alessio stood in the center of chaos, his expression cold and remote. I woke to early morning light filtering through partially drawn curtains and an empty space beside me. The sheets on Alessio's side of the bed were cool to the touch. He hadn't returned. A flicker of worry ignited in my chest as I slipped from the bed, wrapping myself in a silk robe I found hanging in the adjoining bathroom. The penthouse was eerily quiet as I padded through it, searching for any sign of Alessio or the household staff. In the kitchen, I found a note in elegant handwriting. Emma. Business required my immediate attention. Make yourself at home. I'll return as soon as possible. A. The brevity was concerning after the intensity of last night's connection. Had he already regretted asking me to stay? Or was this simply the reality of being involved with a man like Alessio Russo? Unexpected absences, cryptic notes, waiting for his return. I made myself coffee and carried it to the floor-to-ceiling windows, watching the city come alive below. From this height, everything seemed orderly and peaceful, but I knew better now. Beneath the gleaming surface of skyscrapers and carefully maintained parks lurked a shadow world of power struggles and violence. Alessio's world. Could I really live in that world, even at its edges? The question haunted me as minutes stretched into hours with no word from him. By mid-afternoon, restlessness drove me to explore the penthouse more thoroughly. I found a home gym, a library filled with books in multiple languages, and finally, a studio tucked away in a corner room. An art studio, complete with easels, canvases, and every supply an artist could dream of. It was pristine, unused, as if someone had created the perfect space but never worked in it. My fingers itched to touch the brushes, to squeeze paint onto a palette, to lose myself in creation as I hadn't done in years. I was standing before a blank canvas, imagining the possibilities, when a voice behind me made me jump. "It's yours," Alessio said, leaning against the doorframe. He looked exhausted, shadows beneath his eyes, and a tightness around his mouth that spoke of stress and too little sleep. "If you want it." "When did you have time to do this?" I asked, gesturing around the studio. "I made a call this morning," he replied with a small shrug, as if conjuring a fully equipped art studio overnight was nothing remarkable. "You mentioned your art was something you'd lost. I thought perhaps you might want to find it again." The gesture was so thoughtful, so perfectly aligned with a dream I'd almost forgotten, that tears sprang to my eyes. "Alessio." He crossed the room in 3 strides, pulling me into his arms. "I'm sorry I had to leave," he murmured against my hair. "Business complications. It couldn't be helped." I leaned back to study his face, noting new lines of fatigue and a darkness in his eyes that hadn't been there before. "Is everything okay?" "It will be," he said, his tone making it clear he wouldn't elaborate further. His hand cupped my cheek gently. "Have you thought more about what we discussed last night? About staying?" "I have," I admitted, "and I still want to, but I need to understand what I'm getting into, Alessio. Last night wasn't just sex for me. If I stay, if I become part of your life, I need to know what that really means." He guided me to a small sofa in the corner of the studio, still holding my hand as we sat. "Ask me anything. I'll tell you as much truth as I safely can." I took a deep breath. The incident at the warehouse last night. Was it violent? Was someone hurt? A flicker of surprise crossed his features, as if he hadn't expected such a direct question. "Yes," he said after a moment's hesitation. "There was violence. A rival family tried to move product through our territory without permission or payment. Examples had to be made. The clinical way he described what had surely been a brutal encounter should have horrified me, but instead, I appreciated his honesty. And that's the world you live in. Examples being made, territory defended, power maintained through fear. Part of it," he conceded. "There's more. Legitimate businesses, investments, political connections. But yes, violence is sometimes necessary in my position. Would I be expected to participate in any of that?" "Never," he said firmly, squeezing my hand. "Your world would be this," he gestured to the penthouse, the art studio, "and whatever else you want to build for yourself. Education, career, charity work, anything that fulfills you. I want you happy, Emma, not compromised." "But I'd know," I pointed out. "I'd know what paid for all this luxury, what you were doing when you disappeared in the middle of the night. Could I live with that knowledge? Could you live with my knowing it?" Alessio's dark eyes held mine steadily. "That's the question, isn't it? Not whether I can protect you from my world, but whether you can accept it, accept me, knowing the darkness I'm capable of." The honesty of the moment hung between us. No pretense, no evasion, just the stark reality of what building a life with Alessio Russo would mean. "I've seen darkness before," I said finally. "I've lived with it, survived it. At least your darkness isn't directed at me. At least your protection means something." His expression softened, and he brought my hand to his lips, pressing a kiss to my knuckles. "I would kill for you, Emma," he said softly, the words both a promise and a warning. "But I would never hurt you, not ever." And strangely, despite everything I knew about him, or perhaps because of it, I believed him. "Then yes," I said, making my choice with eyes wide open. "I want to stay. I want to build something with you, something real. even if it exists in the spaces between your other world. Relief and something deeper, more primitive, flashed across his features. He pulled me into a kiss that sealed our understanding, passionate but tender, possessive but reverent. When we broke apart, he rested his forehead against mine. "I need to tell you something else," he said, his voice serious again. "About Mike Peterson." My heart stuttered. "What about him? I thought you said he was leaving the city." "He is. But there's more to the story." Alessio sat back slightly, his expression grave. "When my men found him, he wasn't alone. He was with a man named Thomas Reeves. Does that name mean anything to you?" I frowned, searching my memory. "No, I don't think so. Reeves is a detective with the organized crime unit," Alessio explained. "Peterson was feeding him information. About you, about me, about our meeting at the diner. He thought if he could get me arrested, he could get you back." Cold fear washed through me. "Is that why you had to leave last night, because of this detective?" Alessio nodded. "Reeves has been trying to build a case against my family for years. Using you, using my interest in you, was an opportunity he couldn't resist." "What happens now?" I asked, my mind racing with implications. "Will I be questioned? Are you in danger of arrest?" A small, confident smile touched Alessio's lips. "Detective Reeves had an unfortunate accident last night. He fell down a flight of stairs, broke both legs. He'll be on medical leave for at least 6 months. By the time he returns, evidence will have disappeared, witnesses will have forgotten what they saw, and his superiors will have strongly encouraged him to pursue other cases." The casual way he described what had clearly been an orchestrated attack should have terrified me. Instead, I felt a complicated mix of relief and complicity. "And Mike?" "On a plane to Alaska as we speak," Alessio replied, with a very clear understanding that if he ever contacts you or returns to this city, his next accident will be permanent. I should have been horrified by the implicit threat, by how easily Alessio wielded violence as a tool, but all I felt was a profound sense of safety, the certainty that no one would ever hurt me again as long as I was his. "Thank you," I said simply, knowing the words were inadequate, but meaning them nonetheless. Alessio brushed a strand of hair from my face, his touch gentle despite the violence he was capable of. "I protect what's mine, Emma, always." The weeks that followed established a new rhythm to my life, one of luxury and freedom I'd never known before. I left my apartment and my job at the diner, accepting the financial support Alessio offered while I completed my degree in art. The studio became my sanctuary, a place where I could create without worrying about paying rent or buying groceries. Alessio kept his promise, shielding me from the darker aspects of his business. He never took calls in my presence that might expose me to dangerous knowledge, never discussed operations or territory or rivals unless I specifically asked. When he had to leave unexpectedly, he simply said, "Business," and I didn't press for details. Sophia became an unexpected ally, teaching me to navigate the complex social world of the Russo family and their associates. "Never ask direct questions in public," she advised one afternoon over tea. "Observe, listen, remember, but don't probe. Knowledge is both protection and liability in our world." I absorbed her lessons, learning the delicate balance of knowing enough to be safe, but not enough to be dangerous. As the months passed, I found myself settling into a role I'd never imagined. Part artist, part student, part consort to one of the most powerful men in the city. The bruise Mike had left faded completely, along with the memory of fear that had been my constant companion for so long. In its place grew something I hadn't expected: contentment, purpose, and a love for Alessio that deepened with each day, encompassing both the gentle man who held me through the night and the dangerous one who commanded an empire from the shadows. One evening, nearly 6 months after that fateful day in the diner, Alessio led me to the rooftop garden of the penthouse, where dinner had been set up under the stars. Candles flickered in the gentle breeze, and a small orchestra played softly in the background. "What's the occasion?" I asked as he held my chair. 6 months, he said, pouring champagne into crystal flutes. "Since you changed my life," I laughed softly. "I think you have that backward. You're the one who changed everything for me." "We changed each other," he countered, reaching across the table to take my hand. "I was existing before you, Emma, just moving through each day, handling business, accumulating power and wealth, because that's what was expected of me. You made me live again, made me want more than just control and respect. The raw honesty in his voice moved me deeply. This was the Alessio only I got to see. Vulnerable, reflective, capable of a tenderness few would believe him capable of. "I have something for you," he said, reaching into his pocket and placing a small velvet box on the table between us. My heart stuttered in my chest. "Alessio." "Open it," he urged softly. Inside lay not a ring, as I had half expected, but a key. Simple, golden, obviously significant. "What is this for?" I asked, lifting it carefully. "Our future," he replied. "A house on the coast. Private, secure, with a studio overlooking the ocean. A place that can be just ours, away from business, away from the city. A sanctuary." Tears pricked my eyes at the thoughtfulness of the gift. Not just the house itself, but what it represented. A commitment to creating space in his life that wasn't touched by his other world, where we could simply be Alessio and Emma. Not the crime boss and his woman. "It's perfect," I whispered, leaning across the table to kiss him. Later that night, as we lay tangled together watching the city lights through the bedroom windows, I realized how completely my life had transformed in just 6 months. From a waitress with a bruised face hiding from an abusive ex, to a woman who moved confidently through a world of power and danger, protected by the most feared man in the city. "No regrets," Alessio murmured against my hair, as if reading my thoughts. I turned to face him, tracing the lines of his face with my fingertips. "None," I said truthfully. "I chose this life with my eyes open, Alessio. I chose you, all of you, the light and the dark." His arms tightened around me, possessive yet gentle. "And I choose you, Emma. Every day, every night, I choose you." In that moment, cradled in the arms of a dangerous man who would break down every door in the city to protect me, I knew I had found what everyone searches for. Not perfect safety, but perfect belonging. A place, a person, that felt like home.